This is just kind of a free-for-all night. Romans 5, verse 6. He says, "For when we were yet without strength, in due time Christ died for the ungodly." He did it in due time. Now, his idea of due time and ours are totally different. We were without strength. How long does that without strength last? That was 4,000 years. 4,000 years without strength. Then in due time, here he comes. He died for the ungodly. Let's take it a step farther. It wasn't enough that he waited so long to show up. He didn't just show up. He came as a baby, grew up. He had to wait 30 years after he showed up before you heard anything from him. He's got a different idea of timing than we do. Some of his time is quick, quick, quick. Some of it is what we would consider slow, slow, slow. We'll look at some of that. Due time. In Galatians 4, verse 4. Galatians 4, verse 4. Bible says, "But when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law." That's the fullness of time. The fullness there is referring to a, what do you call that sand clock thing? Hourglass. An hourglass. When the bottom fills up, the time is full, and you have to turn it over. When the fullness of time, so time had already run out, the bottom was full. That's when he sent him. And he's made of a woman. That's God's idea of the fullness of time. He didn't do it early. He didn't do it late. He waited till the last second. Right on time. He's made and he made his Son of a woman. So he let him go through all of the normal processes a human does of growth and, waiting and being in subjection to those over him and learning obedience and all of that stuff a human has to go through. This was promised a long time ago, though. From Genesis 3:15, we saw where he promised it. He said, "I'll put in between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and he shall bruise thy heel." Okay, so there we knew way back 6,000 years ago it was going to happen, but it never did. And then finally it did, not 4,000 years ago. Now he said there in our verse in Galatians 4:4 that he was made under the law. So he was not above the law. He was made under the law. He fulfilled the law. He obeyed the law. Now, he was born in an Old Testament context, under the law. That's what the Old Testament saints had to observe, was the law. So that's the way he was born. He was born obeying the Old Testament laws. He went to the whole ritual, the whole ceremonies that everybody in the Old Testament had to do, he had to do. Yeah?
My mind just pictured him going to offer a sin offering. I'm like, how could he do that?
Yeah, no, he would do it. He would do all of the same offerings, all of the same things that anybody in the Old Testament had to do. Otherwise, they could point their finger and said, "You disobeyed the law." He was made under the law. He wasn't above it. Now, his whole purpose was to begin a New Testament. But he had to fulfill the Old Testament, close out the canon of the law. If he didn't do that, he couldn't start something new. You don't get new birth until the old man is dead. So you can't have a New Testament until the Old Testament is complete. We find out what that is in Hebrews 9. Hebrews 9:15. Hebrews 9:15. "For this cause he is the mediator of the New Testament." He's the giver of that New Testament. "That by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament," the law, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. For where a testament is, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. For a testament is of force after men are dead. Otherwise it is of no strength at all, whilst the testator liveth. Last will and testament, the New Testament. So, you can't get a New Testament until he died. So, when you're reading through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and he's here, and it's before the cross, that's not New Testament. It's found in our New Testament because it's the intro to New Testament. However, it's not New Testament doctrine. That's Old Testament. There's been no death of the testator yet. Until there's a death of the testator, there's no New Testament. He made that clear in our passage. Now, he said back in Galatians 4:4, he said, but when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law. He sent his Son. That's who it was. And he sent him so that we could become sons of God. Now, you don't become the only begotten Son of God. There's only one of those. But you can become a son of God. Now, you're going to find this all through the Bible. There's many sons of God. There's only one begotten Son of God, Jesus Christ. But there are many sons of God. So put your thinking cap on a minute. Tell me what the sons of God are. Angels? Okay, so where do we find that?
Galatians 6.
Okay, read it.
Oh, I gotta go find it.
Or just tell me what it says.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's the sons of God took the
Oh, you don't mean Galatians, you mean Genesis.
Genesis.
Mm-hmm. It starts with a G. Yeah. Genesis 6. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
When the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, they took them, yeah, so forth, so on.
I wouldn't have said it that clearly.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember the scripture when we talked about this morning that we are all called the sons of God.
Okay.
Right there, verse 2.
Job chapter 1.
Okay. Tell me about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just tell me what it says.
Where the sons of God will present themselves before.
There was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them.
Yes, sir. That one.
Yes. Job 1:6. Uh-huh. Another one?
I know this.
Job 2:1. Job gives you a bunch of them real quick. Job 1:6, Job 2:1, and again there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. Almost identical word for word. He gives it to you twice within the first 2 chapters. So you see it. Then he does it at the end of the book, in Job 38, 4-7. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Okay, that's when he laid the foundation of the earth. There weren't any humans around. And it says sons, plural, of God. Okay, so those are not the only begotten Son of God, but those are sons of God. So sometime that question will come up. So there's angels. Okay, what else do we know that are sons of God? Jan's got, who was that in reference to? Okay, Christians.
1 John 3:1.
Mm-hmm. 1 John 3:1-2, he says, behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Okay, so we get to be carrying that title. In Galatians 4:6, he says, and because ye are sons, God hath sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So that makes you the son of the Father. John 1:12, he says, but as many as received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God. Okay, so born again Christians, the Son of God. Okay, read that.
For it became him from whom all things and by whom all.
Okay, so we've got a couple of things that are sons of God. We've got angels, born again Christians. Anything else qualify as the Son of God?
Us,
Mm-hmm. That's what Jan was just saying.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Sunday night.
Some people are here and some are here and not really here.
Whether in the body or out of the body.
That's right. We can't tell.
I was just thinking about that huge coffee mug you gave me.
Uh-huh.
I have to try
Daydreaming. Here's another one. Genesis chapter 5. Genesis 5 verse 1. This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him. Now you'd say, but that doesn't say son of God. Good. Glad you said that. Luke 3. Luke 3 verse 38. He gives you the genealogies. Luke 3:38. Which was the son of Enos, which was the son of Seth, which was the son of Adam, which was the son of God. So Adam's considered the son of God. Okay, so we've gotten three classifications so far. We've got angels, we've got Adam, and we've got Christians. Think of anything else? Jesus Christ, the only begotten of the Father, correct? And that one you'll find a lot of references for. Philippians 8:37 says, and Philip said, if thou believest with all thine heart thou mayest. And he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Okay, that's taken out in a modern version. Galatians 4:4, we were just there. But when the fullness of time, when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman. Okay, his Son. There's one other thing that is called a Son of God, and you might not know it right off the bat. Isaiah 43. Isaiah 43 verse 6. The nation of Israel is considered a son of God. That's why they can say our Father, because they're talking direct to God and he's their Father and they're his son.
And we just read this morning, Ephraim was his first.
Mhm. Mhm.
His firstborn.
Mm-hmm. Isaiah 43:6. For I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, keep not back. Bring my sons from afar, my daughters from the ends of the earth. Even every one that is called by my name, for I have created him for my glory. I have formed him, yea, I have made him. And then in Hosea 1:10, yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. Hosea 1:10. So they were the sons of God in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, we get a prophecy they'll be the sons of God in the future again. So that's the classifications of sons of God. Sometimes that comes up, and you'll see that if you don't divide it and put it in its proper place, then you turn up with a mess. Because some people will use some of these verses out of context and preach a philosophy. The philosophy is the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. You'll hear that. And that's saying that we're all the sons of God, saved or lost. God is everybody's father, and you could run to Matthew 6 and say that. So you have to get them in the right place. Okay, so that was just a side note because we ran across Son of God there, so we had to clarify that. Jesus came at the appointed time. The Son was created on the fourth day, so Jesus showed up at the 4,000th year mark because he is the Son of righteousness. In the way you know that is in 2 Peter 3:8. There's two verses that go hand in hand. One's in the New Testament, one's in the Old Testament. They're going to tell you how to use creation. Creation is an answer key for all of the ages. 2 Peter 3:8. But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. So you can see the events of creation and see what happens at 1,000-year marks. At the 4,000-year mark, the sun showed up, or the fourth day, so at the 4,000th year, Jesus Christ shows up. The 7,000th year will match the 7th day. What happened on the 7th day? He rested. So we're going to get a time of rest, millennial rest. Look at Psalms 90, verse 4. These are things people take as figurative. I don't take them as figurative. I take them as literal. He says, "For 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday." One day equal to 1,000 years, when it is past and as a watch in the night. Okay, so a day is the same as 1,000 years in some sense to God. However, a day is not the same as a generation. And a generation is not the same to man as it is to the earth. These are deep things. You'll need these though, because it'll tell you how to take your Bible. Because you'll start making things figurative that shouldn't be figurative if you don't understand some of these principles that are in there, and they're a little hidden. You got to dig. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 7. Deuteronomy 7, verse 9. "Know therefore that the Lord thy God, he is God, the faithful God, which keepeth covenant and mercy with them that love him, and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations." Most people will tell you that's figurative. I don't think it's figurative. I think it's literal. For 1,000 generations. He could have said for endless generations if he wanted it to be figurative. He has the mastery of language. He can say what he wants to say. He chose to say 1,000 generations for a reason. It means 1,000. Look at 1 Chronicles 16:15. Good question. 1 Chronicles 16:15. "Be ye mindful always of his covenant." Okay, it's always connected with this covenant, this something here and that. "The word which he commanded to 1,000 generations." Yeah, I could have said forever. Forever, O Lord, thy word is settled in heaven. But this is something different. Connected with a covenant, and he said it's connected for 1,000 years, generations, not years. Psalms 105. Psalms 105, verse 8. Psalms 105, verse 8. "He hath remembered his covenant forever, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations." Okay, so what in the world is 1,000 generations? The land has a different number of generations than a man has. Man, you'll see the generation of man changes 3 times in the Bible. And I'm not going to go into that. That's a good one to search. You can research that and find out what God calls a generation. It changes 3 times. So, the land itself has a generation period. The earth has a different number that's considered a generation than man has. Leviticus 25. Leviticus 25, verse 3. Leviticus 25, verse 3. This all sounds academic. We're going to pull it all together and make it be meaningful at the end. Leviticus 25, 3. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field. The 6th year thou shalt prune thy vineyard and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field nor prune thy vineyard. Verse 6. And the Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you, for thee and for thy servants, and for thy handmaid, and for thy hired servant, and for thy stranger that sojourneth with thee. Verse 8. And thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee. So the land counts only to 7. Doesn't count 8. Counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's how it generates. At 7, on the 8th, it flips over to 1. Earth doesn't, if the earth were a human, it wouldn't have 10 fingers. It would have 7. It would have to start over after 7 with 1. So, that's the generation of the earth. The earth lasts for 7 years, and then it renews a new generation. Just like he said 1,000 generations. What does that make it? 7,000 years. That's how long this earth is here. 7,000 years, which is 1,000 generations. Now, that'll make sense when you go to something doctrinal. Let's go to something doctrinal. Matthew 24. Matthew 24:34. Matthew 24:34. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. People have scratched their head and tried to figure that thing out for years and years. And they try to make it the generation of people he's talking to. Well, that didn't work because they're dead and gone. Does a generation last 2,000 years? No. Okay. Notice the next 2 words that give you a clue into the generation he's talking about. Heaven and earth, something physical, shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. So he's talking about a generation of something that's physical that passes away, not human. Let's see if this is contextually accurate. Verse 16. Then let them which be in Judea flee unto the mountains. Not rest in God as your high tower. No, flee to the mountain, something physical. Verse 17. Let him which was on the housetop, that's something physical, not come down to take anything, those are physical things, out of his house. Verse 18. Neither let them which are in the field, that's the ground, return back to take his clothes. Verse 19. Woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. That's earthly. What's happening now on this globe. Verse 21. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. From the beginning of the world, this globe. Look at verse 22. And except those days, that's something that happens on this globe, should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved, but for the elect's sake, those days should be shortened. Verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall physical the sun be darkened, and the moon not give her light, the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Those are physical things. Verse 32. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender, and putteth forth leaves, you know that summer is nigh. What's he talking about, a fig tree? He says the fig tree has a generational period. It doesn't produce fruit all year long. It doesn't have green branches all year long. There's a time it regenerates. And then he's told us about a generation that won't pass. Okay, so how long is that generation? It's 7 years. So he's talking about the tribulation the people that are around to see the events he's just talked about. They'll be here for 7 years. That generation of the earth's 7-year marker will not expire until all of those things that is referring to the tribulation have been accomplished. They'll not pass. They'll all be fulfilled when that generation of 7 years for that earth is completed.